Today, I want to talk a little bit about how to optimize sports performance, whether that's that you're an elite athlete and you want to really get to the next level, that last bit of tweaking your performance, or whether you're a hobby athlete. Like I see a lot of my clients, they work really hard, but they also train really hard, and they just want to know how to optimize their performance. Now, a lot of people know that there's all these different tricks and tools and supplements. People take protein powders and they take supplements and they do ice bath, and all of that is all wonderful. But with functional medicine, we always like to dig a little deeper. We want to look at what are underlying factors, what is the root of optimal performance, what are root causes of maybe less than optimal performance, even though you think you might be doing everything right. And we'll dig into a few of these today. I'll also talk about some nutrients because a lot of people supplement a lot of different nutrients. And what research shows is actually there's mostly two nutrients that most athletes are actually quite low in. And one of them is folate and the other one is vitamin D. So both of these, when done research over thousands of athletes, they found that most athletes will likely be not just below optimal, but low in them. And that can contribute to less than optimal performance. Vitamin D, for example, has been shown if you're talking about athletic performance, joint ligament injury prevention. Vitamin D is very important to help our connective tissue be strong and healthy. And what that means that if you have low vitamin D or low in the low range of the normal range, but below the optimal, then you're at a higher risk of injuries, such as tendon and ligament sprains, ruptures, all these things that we don't really want, right? Also, low or below optimal vitamin D can contribute to fatigue and just a higher risk of infections because vitamin D is very important for our immune system as well. So, you want to check your vitamin D levels and you want to make sure that it is not just in the normal range, but in the optimal range. And they found that for most people, that is at around 125 nmol per liter or 50 ng/ml, depending on where in the world you are and you have different references. And that's quite high. So, unless you're really going out into the sunshine and you're not just, a lot of people, I see this all the time, they go into the sun, but they constantly wear sun cream and they can't actually get vitamin D production in their skin because they're blocking the sun rays that are needed for that, the UVB rays. So you want to make sure that you're either getting enough sunshine or without protection, without burning, obviously, because you don't want to damage your skin. But also on the other side, you want to supplement. Ideally, a combination of the two. There's different health benefits to sunshine, not just vitamin D. So you want to make sure you're getting a combination without the burning part. Folate. People often know about folate from folic acid supplementation during pregnancy. It's very important for growth of the baby, but it is also very important for athletes for performance, for optimal health in adults. And part of why that is so important is that it contributes to something called methylation, which is a process that helps our body produce neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine that make us function better, feel happier, be more sharp, focused, determined. But it also helps to break down certain factors in the body, such as hormones, into a safe way. It also helps, and that's one of the big ones that methylation does, and folate is needed for methylation. It helps decide which genes are being turned on or off. And we all have some bad genes in the body, some good ones. And methylation is one of the factors that decides which ones are actually being read and used and which ones are being turned off. So it's crucial, not just for creating a healthy baby once it's in the womb, but also after for performance. They found that that is extremely important, energy levels and long-term health as well and prevention. Then there are a lot of other nutrients that are, they found that they're not usually too low in a lot of the athletes, but they can be below optimal. Now, they found that and I see this all the time, is that you don't just want to dose high supplements and constantly take them. I see this all the time. People come in and they take, let's say, vitamin A in 3 different supplements and they double them all up. And that can actually be toxic because some nutrients accumulate in the body and can be toxic if they're too high. So ideally, you want to measure some of your nutrients. If you can, even do a full nutrient panel and make sure that you're only taking the ones where you're low or below optimal and don't go over. Now, a healthy, good quality multivitamin is usually fine. It's not that highly dosed, but just make sure that you're not then, in addition, taking a hair nail supplement that also has certain nutrients, and then maybe taking one for your brain, and maybe taking a powder for sports performance that also has certain nutrients. And then usually what I see is that people double, triple, quadruple certain nutrients that can be toxic. So don't do that. Now, there's another nutrient that is really important for sports performance. People often know about it. It's iron. Now, iron is, like a lot of the things, is in that there's this bell size shaped curve. So we want to make sure iron is just in the middle, in the Goldilocks position. If we are low in iron, then we're often struggling with fatigue, problems with energy, thyroid problems. For athletes, they can be much more tired. It can really affect performance, VO2 max, the endurance capacity. So we don't want it to be too low, because iron is needed to create red blood cells and send oxygen to our cells. So really important for energy and for all body health. Now, on the contrary, though, they found that if iron is high, or even in the normal range, but on the high end of the range, above optimal, it can actually contribute to inflammation and oxidative stress. And that's kind of like a rusting of our cells. Now, from a longevity perspective, that's not a good thing, because it has been shown to, if it's above optimal for decades, then it can contribute to things like Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So all these things that we're trying to prevent if we're optimizing our health and longevity. But also from an athletic perspective, it creates inflammation. And inflammation, I'll talk about that more in a moment. Inflammation, if there's chronic low-grade inflammation in the body, can reduce sports performance. So you want to make sure that that is in the optimal range. Again, like all the markers, there's usually a normal range. So if you go to your doctor and you get it measured, you'll get, let's say, depending on the lab, depending on whether you're male or female, your ferritin, which is the iron storage, which is what they usually measure. It could be anywhere, the reference range between 15 to 300. But what they found is, for optimal performance, for optimal health, you want it to be at least above 50. Maybe even around 70, 80, 90 might be better for optimal oxygenation of all your cells. But then you want to make sure it doesn't go much above 100. And I see this all the time, in particular in men, because men you're not using your blood every month like a woman when they have their period. Monthly cycles, getting rid of some of that blood and recycling the whole body. Men often start to accumulate iron, and so their ferritin starts to creep up. And then, unless they're doing something about it, it can cause what I just said, all this oxidative stress and inflammatory problems. Now, a really simple trick you can do if your ferritin is starting to creep up, you can donate blood. So that's a simple first step. And then you can also do other strategies, obviously adjusting your diet. Really important part and factor here as well is to note that while iron stores, if they're above optimal, can contribute to inflammation, which is a problem, having inflammation from other factors and other underlying reasons in itself can also make that ferritin, that iron storage, that blood marker, be higher than we want it to be. So when you're getting your ferritin measured and it's high or above optimal, you want to make sure it's actually due to iron stores and not due to some underlying inflammation, chronic infections that are making that ferritin look high or your iron stores look high, but actually it's not that. So you want to make sure you're not just going to donate lots of blood, because actually donating blood can reduce your sports performance as well, because then you're having reduced capacity to send oxygen to your cells temporarily. So you want to make sure you're working with someone that knows how to read and interpret that. Now, another reason a lot of people, or a lot of athletes, or people that like to exercise a lot, are actually prone to lower iron levels is that you're losing iron when you exercise. So there are different factors that contribute to that. One being that when you're actually, just from the impact, if let's say you're running a lot, the impact can make you lose iron blood cells through it goes and it can destroy it, and you can kind of get rid of it in the body. Also, sweat loses some iron. And then another factor that people often don't think about is that when you're exercising a lot. While you're exercising, your body is in fight or flight mode, that sympathetic nervous system, which is important when you're exercising. Your body thinks it's running away from a tiger, which is good for your performance in that moment. But what it does, it shifts your blood flow and all the energy systems and the priorities of your body over towards your muscles to run away from that perceived tiger for sports performance. Good thing. But it shifts it away from your other organs, such as your digestive tract, also your reproductive organs, other things that are more in the healing, restorative, rest, digest, and heal state, called parasympathetic nervous system. People often have heard about the vagus nerve. It's kind of a trendy word, but our vagus nerve is our main parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal nerve. And when we're exercising a lot, we're in that fight or flight mode more often. And what that does, it shifts away the blood flow and the nutrients from our gut lining. Now, what that can mean is that it can mess with our gut microbiome and our gut health. Now, from an iron perspective, it means that we might have less of a capacity to absorb iron. It can also, sometimes that fight or flight mode can actually lower our estrogen and testosterone if we're in it for too much, and that can reduce the absorption of iron. But let's talk a little bit more about the gut microbiome and inflammation, because those are often the overlooked factors. A lot of athletes, a lot of elite athletes, but also hobby athletes, they are aware that they need to make sure that their iron is high enough and their B vitamins, such as folate, vitamin D, those sorts of things. But what they often don't understand is that there's this underlying root cause that kind of, we call it the microbiome, that is basically our garden, our soil that creates our energy. Now, if our gut is if there's an imbalance in our gut microbiome, in the bacteria inside our gut, then we are more prone to not being able to absorb the right nutrients, so we're more prone to nutrient deficiencies, but we're also more prone to inflammation. Now, there are lots of different factors that play into that. One I just mentioned is that constant fight or flight mode. If we then don't get enough time in the restorative healing mode, where we're shifting our emphasis over to the vagus nerve, we're sending all the right nutrients to our gut, and we can actually heal, digest, then our gut eventually becomes, they call it a leaky gut, where the gut lining becomes more permeable because it just doesn't get enough nutrient and attention. And what that can then lead to is that we can develop hidden food intolerances. I see this all the time. And people are often not aware because they might not have digestive issues, but they can have low-grade inflammatory issues. They can be things like eczema, they can be acne, other skin rashes, fatigue, brain fog, achy joints, just not feeling right. They can all be inflammatory. They can all be signs that there's low-grade inflammation, or more pronounced, such as endometriosis, PCOS in female athletes, but also other inflammatory factors. Now, and long term, it can contribute to autoimmune diseases, all sorts of other bad issues. But let's talk about how the gut microbiome, inflammation, and food intolerances are linked. Now, normally, if we have a strong, healthy gut, we have the right bacteria in there, not an overgrowth of bad types of bacteria, not enough, and enough of the good ones that keep our gut lining really nice and strong. Then let's say you eat a healthy food like an almond, very typical, or an egg. They're very typical examples where I see people develop food intolerances, even though they're wonderfully healthy, nutritious foods. So let's say eat an egg, the gut lining is nice and strong and healthy. Then that egg gets broken down into tiny particles, and then it passes into your bloodstream. The immune system then recognizes it because you've been eating it for a while, since you were a child, and it's healthy, right? So no problem there. However, if the gut microbiome becomes imbalanced for whatever reason, not enough of the good bacteria, too many bad bacteria overgrowing, maybe due to that excess amount of stress from over exercising, not enough time in the restorative mode, maybe not getting enough fiber to feed the good gut bacteria. There can be lots of factors contributing to the gut microbiome being out of balance, also called dysbiotic. Then that can lead to a slightly more permeable gut lining. And if that, in layman terms, they call it leaky gut, but it's actually a thing. It's permeable gut lining, where the gut lining becomes slightly, you have these, basically the parts between it become bigger. And then it allows the same egg to get into the bloodstream at a different shape when it's not digested to the same amount. And then the immune system doesn't recognize it anymore. And it thinks it's being attacked by an invader, because everything that the body doesn't recognize, it thinks it must be something attacking us. And then they create inflammation to fight it off. That's what it does with infections, viruses. So it's a good thing. But if it's again something that we eat every day, then that's a problem, because then we're constantly having that low grade inflammation, and it's not even doesn't even have anything to kill off, because an egg is nothing to kill, right? But then we have this lingering low grade inflammation that can start to degrade our exercise performance, and it can contribute to all these niggly symptoms I mentioned before. They found in research that low grade inflammation makes athletes it makes their longevity, their athletic longevity as well, and the span of their career, it can shorten that a lot. So oftentimes whether someone has to retire early has to do with how their body is overall. Are there low grade inflammatory factors that make the body break down quicker? It can break down and make the ligaments and tendons more brittle quicker. So there's all these factors. It's not just feeling good, having digestive issues or skin issues right now, but it really affects overall performance and longevity for athletes, for their career. But also, like I said, inflammation before can contribute to Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease and cancers, things like that. So also from an overall health longevity perspective, it's really important to make sure that our inflammatory levels are generally low, and they only rise if there's an infection or a wound that needs to be um, get rid of or healed. So I talked about how there can be hidden food intolerances to healthy foods, and I see this all the time. People that have I do either we start with a food intolerance test and they come back with all these crazy food intolerances to healthy foods, and we think, oh wait, there must be a hidden gut imbalance, because that doesn't just happen. We shouldn't be intolerant to healthy foods like eggs and almonds, avocados, all these wonderfully healthy foods. I often see people come back with these crazy panels on their blood testing, having intolerances to all of them. Now, then we want to also run a gut microbiome test to see what's going on inside the gut. Are there overgrowth of certain bacteria? Are there undergrowth of certain healthy bacteria that keep that gut lining nice and strong and the immune system nice and calm? So we need to address it, not just cutting out those foods. That wouldn't be a good strategy long term. Temporarily, yes, you want to cut out those foods so the immune system can calm down, inflammation can go down, but then you must also address the root cause. Otherwise, you'll just be in that vicious cycle of developing new food intolerances. If you haven't addressed the underlying trigger, you'll just develop an intolerance to the next foods you're then substituting with. Now, the other thing that also plays into that is if the gut microbiome is unhealthy and the gut has become slightly leaky, then it allows some of the bacterial particles into the bloodstream. They call them LPS, lipopolysaccharides, and they are also inflammatory. So just the gut microbiome in itself, if it is faulty, it can trigger low-grade inflammation in the body. So research really shows that the gut microbiome, low-grade inflammation are really big factors for not just athletic performance, so they can make you more fatigued, they can slow you down, but also reduce your lifespan and your career span if you're an elite athlete, and also long term for other people that are not just interested in their sports performance but in their long term health. It can then contribute over decades towards all these sorts of health issues I mentioned before. So what does that mean altogether? If you're an athlete or an elite athlete or a hobby athlete, if you want to optimize your health and you're training for something in particular, don't just start taking lots of different supplements. Make sure you test. You don't just guess. Don't just throw in all these different things. And you also want to support your gut microbiome and inflammation. And again, there, I always recommend testing and not just guessing, because some people actually have an overgrowth of bacteria in their gut called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, from eating lots of sugars and carbs and junk food over time. And if the gut microbiome and if the vagus nerve isn't strong enough because you're in fight or flight mode so much, then it might not be able to kill off the overgrowth of these infections. And then if you're, let's say you just throw in probiotics because you read that's a good thing, prebiotics, probiotics, which are good for most people. But if you already have an overgrowth, it might actually make things worse. So I always like to test things. For example, if there's a fungal overgrowth, it might just be that you're consuming too much sugar. And obviously, if you're an athlete, you do need some carbs to fuel your exercise. It's slightly different from an athlete. That part is actually one of the big deciding factors between athletes and just healthy people that want to be slim and healthy and active. They need a lot less carbs than an athlete where it's about peak performance, fast movements. They need a lot more carbs actually. But there's this fine line between feeding fungal overgrowth because fungus loves sugar and sugar actually carbs turn into sugar inside the body. So ideally, again, you work with someone that can help you tweak and adjust the things to make it very bespoke and targeted to you. You can test your gut microbiome, you can test your blood sugar, you can monitor that nowadays with one of these continuous blood sugar monitors to see where you can adjust, where you need to optimize certain things. And then one last thing I wanted to add in there is don't just throw in, we talked about the supplements, nutrients, but also antioxidants. If you are an athlete and you're really trying to optimize peak performance, then research shows throwing in lots and lots of antioxidants might actually mess with your peak performance. So antioxidants like vitamin C and E, they're very important. And I usually get all my patients on a multivitamin, a good quality one that has some of that in it. Vitamin C is also very important for the immune system, for our collagen production. So it's very important for healthy aging, longevity, health optimization. But if you're an elite athlete and you're really trying to maximize your gain of your workout, then you might want to time your antioxidants and not just throw them all in while you're training. Because what happens when you're training is that you're actually stressing the body out for that time being, which is a good thing because then the body adapts and gets stronger. Now, if you are throwing in all these antioxidants, it can reduce how much the body adapts. So far, that some research suggests if you take in high dose antioxidants while you're training, you're not really reaping the benefits from that workout. That's also for hobby athletes. So let's say you're doing a workout and you're trying to get stronger and healthier, and maybe you're slightly insulin resistant and you're trying to get the benefits, then don't just throw in all these antioxidants because it might actually slow down your progress. So you want to time it and make sure that you're doing it at the right time and for the right dosing, and you have the right goal in mind. Now, I hope you found this helpful. I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I do see patients one-on-one in London and on Zoom worldwide to help you optimize your strategy, testing, and then come up with a bespoke diet, lifestyle, supplement plan that doesn't just kind of suppress some of the symptoms or throw in anti-inflammatory supplements to try and suppress inflammation, but we always look at what is actually causing low-grade inflammation. What's your gut doing? What are your nutrient levels doing? How can we optimize your levels to really not just help you feel better right now, perform better if you're an athlete, but also live longer, extend your career if you're an elite athlete, but also extend your longevity for healthy living, optimized health. Keep your brain healthy, keep your bones healthy, keep your whole body and your mind healthy and thriving. So far, bye for now.